once again. I am so excited to have you all here the second time. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video and also leave your comments in the comment section below. All right, let's get into it. In today's tutorial, I'll be looking at how to style this this index page on the right side here. All right, how to start this using CSS. We'll be applying a lot of flexbox and a lot of CSS concepts in this video. I invite you all to pay close attention, follow closely, and make sure you understand the video. The understanding is the most important thing to do here. Thank you as you do that. All right, so as we can see from the picture, we have a navigation bar at the top, and then in the middle of the navigation we have a logo here, right? And then also at the end we have an icon. I don't have the icon though, but I however have the logo. Right? We also have this writing here on the main page, and then some two other buttons, right? So let's see the HTML. Let's go to the HTML. I'll be using a container that holds my navigation, right? And then it holds my logo as well. So the logo is an image I'll be putting inside. The logo is a class, right? It's a class, it's a div that contains the image of the logo you see on the screen here. And then I also have another container which is the workspace. I call it workspace because it is a main container that holds everything else will be seen on the page: the Bytesphere, the security, cyber security beyond limits, and the two buttons, right? Everything else will be here. And now I'll be having another div called buttons to hold my two buttons, right? So that when we apply the display flex, the buttons would still remain side by side instead of going below one below the other, right? Now, starting with the CSS styling. First of all, I will go live so we can be seeing the page whilst doing the styling and see the progress we are doing. Alright, so on the right side, this is how my document is looking so far. There is no style at all. There is no styling, no flex, nothing. So this is a basic HTML, and this is how it's looking so far. So let's start with the CSS. So the first thing I want to do is to remove all original paddings and margins, right? I don't want to be fighting with them because most of the HTML elements, they have their default paddings and margins. I want to take all of that off so I can be able to measure my own margins and then my own paddings by myself. All the HTML elements, they come with their default paddings and margins, right? So I've taken that off using the universal selector, the asterisk. And also I've also used my personal favorite font family for the text that will be appearing on the screen. All right. Now from this point, I'll start styling from this very container, the container that holds our navigation bar, right? So I'll say dot container, and then the first style is to display flex, right? To display flex. Then after displaying flex, I'll align everything to center. I'll align items to center. Then I will justify content space evenly, right? Equal amount of space between um, all of my elements, right? And then I'll give it a height. It is too tall, so I'll give it a height of 8. 8 of the viewport height will be fine, right? So it's looking this way, and that's perfectly fine. Also give it a background, right? So let me give it a background color of black. Okay, background color of black. That's fine. The next thing I'll start from this session is the navigation. So to do that, I said navigation one is a class name. So I'll say nav1. Then I'll start the navigation URL. I'll say list star. I don't want the dot to show, so I'll say list star now. So as you can see on the screen, the dots are gone. Right. Then from here, I'll display the navigation as well as flex. After displaying as flex, I will align everything. I'll align my items to center. Then I'll give them a gap of 20 pixels each. Alright. Then from this point, I will give them a color of white. I want the writing to appear white. And then I want it to be bold. So I want the writings to appear bold, so I will use font weight and say bold. Right? If you can see on the screen, you realize that our logo is quite huge, so it is making it is not looking nice at all, but the navigation is already looking attractive. So let's work on the logo. So we'll go and look at the logo class and we'll look at the image inside. So for the image, we'll give it a height. I'll give it a height of I'll give it a height of 5 pixels, 8 pixels. Let's see, 8 pixels is too small, so let me say 20 pixels. Let's see, it's still too short, so let me say 30 pixels. All right, still too short. Let me say 40 pixels. All right, let me say 50 pixels. 50 pixels. Okay, I'll stick with the 50 for now, and then I'll give some margin to the left and right of it. So to the left, I'll give a margin of 2 rem so that I can push the navigation to the left a little. And to the right, I'll give a margin of 2 rem as well. Right, I'll give a margin of 2 rem. So far so good. Everything is looking nice. Everything is looking nice. Now I want it to come down a little, so I'll give a margin to the top. I'll give a margin to the top. Let's say 5 pixels. Right. Okay. So it's perfectly in the center of the page, sorry, of the navigation bar actually. Now from this point, the next thing I want to style is my workspace. So I'll target my workspace this way, and then I'll give it a background image. That's the first thing I'll be doing. A background image, I'll say URL, and since I already have the image in my working folder, I'll just type the name, and then yeah, this is the image I'll be using for my background. So it's appearing on the screen now. Let's do a little bit of styling. I'll say background position, and I'll center the image. So I'll center, I'll give it a background size, and I say it should cover everything, right? It should cover, and then from here, I will say background repeat, right? I don't want the background to look like to repeat itself, so no repeat. And then thereafter I'll give it a height. Alright. So the entire page should be 100 of the viewport height. Because the navigation bar has an 8 already out of the 100, I'll give 92 to this one. So I'll say 92 of the view height. So yeah, it's looking good. It's looking good so far, so good. Now from this point, the next thing I want to do is that I want the writing to be centered in the middle, right, in the center of the page. So I will say display flex, display flex. Now see what happens. Everything is now placed side by side, right? Everything I have on the workspace is placed side by side. For that to rectify that, I will say flex direction, and I'll say column. Now whenever we apply flex direction to column, the main axis switches from top to bottom, and the cross axis switches from left to right. So to move the things to the middle horizontally, I'll use align items instead of justify, because the cross axis is now moving horizontally. Okay. So I'll align everything. Now we are almost done. So let's look at the writing we have, the Bytesphere. For that, I use H1. So I'll say H1, and then to style this, I'll give it some font size. First of all, I'll give it a color. So let me see color. Let me try white. Alright, white is fine. And then font size. Font size, I'll give it 3.5 rem. Let me see. Okay, so I need a little bit of margin between it and then the navigation bar. So for that, I'll say margin and I'll use 20 pixels. 20 pixels of margin at the top. Okay, everything is looking so good so far. The next thing I want to style is the cybersecurity beyond limits. For that, I use H3. So I'll say workspace H3, and then I'll say color. Let me use color white as well. So for color, I'm going to use white. I'll reduce the font size a little. So the font size here, I'll use 1.2 rem. Okay, that's fine. And then I'll give it a little margin at the top so that there can be a space between it and then the Bytesphere. So for the margin, I'll give it 20 pixels as well. Margin at the top to be 20 pixels. And I want the font to be bold, so I'll bolden it as well. I'll bolden it as well. I'll bolden it as well. And here too, I'll bolden this as well. Font weight. It's already bold, so because we are using header. Alright. But then if you use paragraph instead of your header, then it is advisable you apply the bold to it. Now I will go and style my buttons now. Right. First of all, the buttons, I've kept the buttons in a container, right? In a container, and the class for that container is buttons. So I will go and style from that class. I'll target the class buttons, the class buttons, and then there's a mistake there. So it's dot buttons. I'll target this, and then I'll give it some margin at the top so that there will be some space between the cybersecurity beyond limits and our buttons. So for that, I'm giving it 30 pixels. 30 pixels of space. Alright, that looks fine. And then I'll give it a gap of 20 pixels. Notice that nothing happened, right? Because nothing happened, I'll use display flex again, because this gap works with what display flex, right? So now there is a little bit of space between the two buttons. Now let me start the buttons themselves. So I want the buttons in the class buttons, right? So for each button, I will give a padding of 15 pixels top and bottom, and also 29 pixels left and right. Okay, the font size should be 1 rem, right? And then the font weight should be bold. I'll use bold for my font weight. And then the border, I will not use any border, so I'll say border none. Then I'll apply some border radius so that the buttons can be rounded. So I'll say border radius 10 pixels. Okay, that's fine. And then cursor. Anytime I move my cursor on the button, I want to see it change to contour. Alright. Then the final thing, I'll give it a background color. So the background color, I can use, let's say, some dark blue. So I'll say blue, and then from blue, I'll use a color picker to make it a little bit darker. Something like a dark blue. Okay, dark blue is not fine. Okay, this is fine. All right, this looks fine. So that's it for today's class. I hope you have learned something. You saw how we use Flexbox to neatly arrange this page, this particular web page, without any stress. And that is it for today's lesson. See you again next time. Leave your comments below in the comment section, or I'll see you in my next tutorial.